Mr. President.
The Senator from West Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank my colleague from the great state of Iowa for bringing forth her 3 R's. I think they are very succinct, and they're the message that certainly I want to convey with my colleague from the great state of Florida here today. Respect the science, reopen the schools safely, and return students, teachers, and learning to the classroom. A year ago, we were only just starting to realize what COVID-19 was about, almost a year to this date, practically. Yet no one could have foreseen that many children would leave their classroom in 2020 and still not have returned in March of 2021. Fortunately, during these past few months, we've come a long way in our knowledge of COVID-19. We knew little about how the virus spread when most schools closed last March. But now experts have had the opportunity to learn more about the spread of the disease, specifically as it would spread in a K-12 school environment. At the end of January, the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, published data showing that in-person learning for K-12 students with limited in-school COVID-19 spread is indeed possible. The schools studied adhered to the public health practices many of us have followed: wearing a mask, social distancing, washing hands, avoiding large groups, and quarantining after exposure to the virus. Since this data was released, CDC has gone on and issued additional guidance for reopening our schools. This guidance focuses on many of the same public health strategies, as well as cleaning facilities and additional ventilation. In addition to the improved knowledge of how COVID-19 affects our schools, we also have safe and effective vaccines. By enabling our teachers and other education professionals to have the vaccine in a priority measure, we continue to forge ahead with reopening our schools. Yesterday, Dr. Clay Marsh, who is our state's coronavirus czar, and he's done an incredibly great job, he has also led our efforts in our successful vaccine efforts, and I want to remind the nation that West Virginia is #1 in vaccine distribution per capita. We've done a fantastic job. Dr. Marsh said yesterday, quote, "The classroom is a safe place to be." He continued by saying, "The K-8 classroom, there is a tremendous amount of really good data to suggest that it is even a safer place to be than staying in your community." Following these comments, our state's Board of Education voted in favor of our students, kindergarten through 8th grade, returning to a full 5-day in-person learning. They'd had some blended, some in class, some at home. While data we've seen makes a very compelling case for why we can get children safely back into the classroom with the right mitigations, other realities make it even more necessary. With the option of remote learning at home, there are still many children, and especially in states like mine in West Virginia, who struggle with connectivity. Despite robust funding from Congress to attempt to address these issues, the digital divide is very real, and it begins to exacerbate the have and have not phenomenon. As a result, these children can be affected for years. I hear concerns from parents all over my state. Last year, I had a Mercer County principal tell me that many of the students in their class parents had to drive their students to a parking lot of a fast food restaurant so they could get some Wi-Fi so they could do their homework. A constituent from Lewis County recently wrote to my office expressing her frustration with balancing her work with also the remote learning that her children are doing. To make matters worse, they can't get on the internet at the same time in their home. Another parent from Berkeley County wrote to me with a heartbreaking story about how her daughter cries at the computer because she requires extra help on certain assignments. Parents helping their children on schoolwork can only go so far. In-person attention is absolutely necessary and something that the internet can't solve through a Zoom meeting or a video meeting, or what a lot of this is go to certain assignments on your computer where there's nobody to interact with whatsoever. There are very real concerns that parents have that fear their children will fall behind and are falling behind without access to their schoolwork. Even more disturbing are the concerns I've heard from child abuse advocates throughout our state. The heightened stress, school closures, loss of income, social isolation is resulting from this pandemic has increased the risk of child abuse and neglect. Yet without the safe space of the school and the watchful eyes of our teachers and other caring professionals, I fear too many children are falling through the cracks and have nowhere to turn. Last week, our West Virginia DHHR Deputy Secretary said there were 8,000 fewer referrals to Child Protective Services this year in our state. Sadly, we know it's not because it's not occurring. It's because teachers and school employees aren't there to notice the abuse and neglect and to be reporting it. And this is where our teachers are so incredibly caring and invaluable. According to data from the CDC, between April and October of 2020, emergency departments nationwide have experienced a rise in the share of total visits from children with mental health needs. In my state of West Virginia, our State Board of Education has reported a spike in attempted suicides in Cabell County. In addition, parents have had to make hard decisions as they attempt to balance their careers with their children's education. Especially more difficult for those younger children, those parents of younger children who can't leave their child home for any period of time as they are doing their schoolwork. As more workers are being asked to physically return to their workplaces, the lack of in-person learning and adequate child care is hindering many from returning to work. This is especially true for many women who work outside the home. In fact, many women are having to quit their job as a result. According to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the January jobs report showed that some 275,000 women left the workforce, while about 71,000 men left the workforce. Overall, approximately 2.4 million women have left the workforce since last February. This has been a common and unfortunate trend we are seeing as a result of the pandemic. And I know for certain it is definitely tied in to the fact the schools have not reopened. West Virginia State Superintendent said recently, quote, "There is absolutely no substitution for a teacher in the lives of a child." He continued by saying, "There's no substitution for what that means to the community and the families, not just for the academics, but for the social, emotional, and physical well-being." He's absolutely right. And this is just another reason why it is so important for our children to return to school safely. At the same time, I know there is no one-size-fits-all solution. State leaders, local governments, school administrators, and parents must take this data and these recommendations and apply them to the realities they see in their own communities. Congress has provided $68 billion in resources for K-12 schools that they can use and 20 could use last year, which school could use to implement these strategies. For these, this may mean continuing some form of remote learning. For others, including my state of West Virginia, it means bringing every K-8 student to a 5-day work week, 5-day school week in school. Before I conclude, I want to take a moment to thank the teachers, the parents, and the students who have adjusted and readjusted over the past years. Despite the many challenges, whether they're technical, logistical, or emotional challenges, you've tried to make it work the best you can. And for that, we are all very grateful. But now, we've got to do the 3 R's. We must look at the data, listen to the stories, and look at the realities in our classrooms and in our communities. Get our children back to school. Respect the science, reopen the school safely, and return students, teachers, and learning to the classroom where it should be. I yield back. Thank you.